Hi, Frank here with MORF Tech. In this video, we're going to talk about how to install your MORF Tech trifold bars on a bike with a standard stem. The tools that you're going to need a 5mm, a 4mm, and a 3mm Allen wrench. You're going to need a torque wrench with each one of those sockets, and really your brain. Don't forget that, right? So in order to install these bars, the first step, obviously you're going to have a standard stem. We're going to take the stem and put the bars in the stem like you would normally. Okay, now I'm snugging the bars up. We're going to adjust them a little bit later, so we'll torque this head up once we're kind of almost wrapped up and finished. So here you'll see the bars are installed. We're going to run it through a couple of its cycles. We talked about that in kind of the introduction video. I'm going to pull back a little bit to release the tension on the locks, push the release levers, and push it forward and back. Everything looks like it's running nice and smooth. Next, we're going to get the bar extensions. If you're using the 35-degree bend, you're obviously going to cut these down to the length you want, but let's go ahead and put them on the bike first just so you can sit down and get yourself fit. So we're going to take this 5mm Allen wrench, and you'll see it fits right in the slot here. And we can come in, screw that in, and tighten it into place. And there you can see you're going to end up probably wanting to cut these to length. Now I'm going to go ahead and install the straights just because I think they look a little better and they're a little more compact. But obviously you guys can install whatever you like. I've cut mine down to 4 inches just because that's the way the bike fits for me. So we're going to install both of these bar ends and torque that connection up. So we're just going to use some mechanical shifters. Install them. I'll get them all installed. And the reason why we put these brakes facing forward was so that we could have this bar end use that particular real estate. So I'm going to go ahead and install those. Be right back. So we've installed the shifter. I'm actually setting this up like a 1x because I want to show you how to install the cables, whether you've got electronic shifting, a 1x, or if you're using mechanical shifts. So the next step is actually going to be running the cables. So in order to run the cables, you want to take the bars and move them into the arrow condition. Next, you're going to take your shifter cable, and in the bottom there's 2 holes that go in through the end of the bar here. The one closest to the front wheel is where your shifter cable goes, and it will feed right through. As you can see, it feeds right through the bar like that. I'm going to take the ferrule. You can put the ferrule on, but it's really important that you fully seat that ferrule on the housing, and that the shifter cable housing is fully seated inside of the shifter itself. Now I like to run a zip tie or a little bit of electrical tape around here just to make sure everything is nice and snug when we're setting the clips. You can leave it in there, or you can take it out once you put your bar tape on and all that stuff. So that's nice and fully seated. I actually felt it move forward a little bit there. And then the brake cable housing, you need to make sure that you're using the little metal, ferrule ends, and it just simply slides right into that slot. Make sure it sits fully seated, and you're good. And now we're going to run that and clamp these cables to the bar itself. So you're going to a little 5mm screw and the clip. Put those together. Tighten up the clips, and there you have it. Brake cable shifter cable housing is run. So we're going to open those up. You can see kind of the bend that happens there, and then you go ahead and run your cable into the bike itself. Now if you're running electronic shifters or a 1x, the process is actually a little bit simpler. We're going to run our brake cable, because on a 1x we obviously don't have a shifter, into the brake cable little counter bore, and instead of using the clip, we're actually going to just go straight in to the bar with these M5 bolts that have large flanges on them. This actually keeps things nice and clean as well. Now our cables are nice and tidy up underneath there and nice and tight. The next step is going to be figuring out how long you want the cables. Now normally what I do here is I'll run the bars into the braking condition, And I'll take a rather large zip tie and I'll run it around the outside of the stem, but I'll run it nice and loose. So on the front brake, obviously it's a pretty simple process. You're going to take this cable, you're going to find the right length and cut it to length, and then run it in there and tighten your brake like you would normally. On the rear brake and on any of the shifter cable, you're really going to be taking a look and seeing at where you're going to run the cable. Now some cables come into the top of the tube, some come into the side of the frame, so it's really just going to be up to you to try to make it as nice and tidy as possible. And what you want to do when you do that is make sure that you get the proper range of motion. So before you cut them, you want to make sure that you can get the correct range of motion, but you can do it in a way that the cable's going to move nice and smooth. That's why I like to put a little zip tie on there to make sure that everything runs the way it's supposed to run. When you're running your brake cables, you're just simply going to run them through the hole on the brake levers into the housing. I'm going to run it in and make sure that it's not binding anywhere and that it runs smoothly in and out of the shifter or the brake cable housing. I'm going to do the same thing with the shifter housing and set your bike up that way. Okay, I'm going to show you a little bit about the adjustability of fit. So you can see with the bars, when they come, take out the short bolt, which is 30 millimeters. And you can take your arm pads and you can put them directly to the aero bars. This gets you very, very narrow. And you have two different positions that you can go very, very narrow. And it also gets you very, very low. Now, if you need to get your pad spacing higher, well, that's very simple. You're going to take the longer bolt, and we talked about the short bolts versus the longer bolts. So this is the short bolt. This is the long bolt. And we're going to go ahead and use the 25 millimeter spacer. Okay? So the 25 millimeter spacer goes with this arm pad bar and the long bolt. And we're going to go ahead and install that right here. What we're going to do is put on the arm pads. And you'll notice, uses two M5 bolts, you can arrange the distances out, forward, back. There is a lot of adjustability in where these pads are. Torque that down to 5 Newton meters. And then on the bars, these pads, we're going to loosen them up. And like I said, we can rotate these pads in or out to get the angle of attack where you want it. Now, if you find that, you know what, I need my tips a little bit higher or lower, well, we're just simply going to rotate the bar up or down. And that's really kind of one of the beautiful things about the MORF Tech bars, is that you can take them really into extreme angles. And if you find that these pads need to go higher, well, that's a simple stem change. You can go with higher angle stems or bring them down or whatever the case may be. So there really is a lot of adjustability that you can do with the bars. And then as far as the bar ends go, you can run a different, you can cut your bar ends to length to what you need. On the website, there's a fit sheet, and on that fit sheet makes a lot of measurements around the bike to help you get kind of situated with what you need. Use that tool, I think it'll help. And it's really more like just a general bike fit from there. If you want to run road bike drops, like you see here, you're going to need to take the brakes off. And this would be the same thing if you don't want to use our included brakes, but instead you want to use the brakes on a Di2 or whatever it is. So ultimately what you need to do is remove the brake, and it's actually very, very easy. There's a small M6 set screw that's right here in the side. You're just going to unscrew that set screw. And you're going to take anything small, I think this is a 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench, but whatever it is, and you're just going to push into this little tiny hole, and that will push that pin out, and you can remove the brake lever. Easy as that, right? Now, in order to install your drops, you simply put them in there like that, you run your 5mm Allen wrench and you torque that guy up to around 15 Newton meters. Now, in order to run the brakes, you're going to have to run your brake housing through the same hole that you would run your brake housing normally. So we have these optional little clips that run in that same hole as your brake cable housing. Use the same pin. So we put that same pin in, and now your brake cable housing will run in and out the back, and you can run your brakes in just exactly as you did before, and then run your brakes around the top to the hoods. So that's how we can run the hoods. Pretty universal, pretty kind of cool. Having a set of drops that are aero at the same time. One of the really great things about traveling with this configuration is you simply take off the arm pads. It's important that you put the little clips in to make sure that the pins don't fall out. So these 3mm spacers right in there, because you don't want those pins to fall out during transport. And then you simply, so the pins are basically what the pivot pins for the whole bar assembly. So in order to transport, you don't have to take the whole cockpit off. You just loosen the stem clamp up, take the bars, rotate them down and forward, and it sits nice and compact for shipping. Thank you. Thank you for supporting us and buying our product. We really think you're going to love it.